Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into the soft-lit, heavy-curtained world of Victorian medicine, where the most scandalous prescription wasn't for laudanum or leeches, but for something far more awkward at family dinner: the orgasm prescription. That's right. Victorian doctors, armed with top hats and a reckless confidence in their own moustaches, truly believed that a brisk round of, let's call it ladies' manual therapy, could cure the infamous diagnosis of hysteria. And no, you can't make this up. But before you get too excited, please take a second to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what happens here. Leave a comment about where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, turn on a fan for that soft, soothing white noise, and settle in with a blanket or maybe a fainting couch, just in case things get a little too emotionally stimulating. Let's pause a moment. Have you ever wondered what would happen if your 19th century doctor insisted that all your problems, from mood swings to wandering womb syndrome, could be solved with a bit of, let's say, vigorous medical attention? Did Victorian doctors really think women were being suffocated by their own uterus? Did anyone ever actually faint from overexcitement? Or was that just a polite way of saying it's Tuesday? And how exactly did a group of serious men in wool suits and mutton chops decide that a pelvic massage was a medical procedure and not a plot twist in a very bad romance novel? Would you last a day in a world where your most private appointment involved a waiting room, a hand crank, and a doctor assuring you this is absolutely clinical, Mrs. Featherstone? Would your insurance cover manual stimulation? Or would they just send you home with smelling salts and a coupon for a new corset? Congratulations, you've just woken up in the most awkward year in medical history, 1883. Your therapist is wearing gloves, the air smells faintly of mothballs and nervous anticipation, and you've just been diagnosed with hysteria, which, apparently, is cured by the most Victorian method possible. Good luck. It starts innocently enough. 1 minute, you're sipping tepid tea in a house full of overstuffed furniture and crushing social anxiety. The next, your doctor is declaring you have hysteria, a condition with symptoms ranging from occasionally sighing to having thoughts. Welcome to your first Victorian consultation, where every answer is wrong and every symptom is somehow your uterus's fault. Let's set the scene. You're in a parlor so heavily curtained that sunlight is just a rumor, surrounded by 12 family portraits, none of whom look happy, and the persistent scent of mothballs, boiled cabbage, and unspoken marital disappointment. The clock ticks like a metronome for your rising dread. You smooth your skirt, clear your throat, and try to appear less alive, hoping to blend in with the upholstery. Maybe if you sit perfectly still, your problems will dissolve, or at the very least, the doctor will forget you exist. No such luck. The knock at the door is soft, but relentless. The family maid, who's been glaring at you ever since you spilled jam on the antimacassar, ushers in the doctor with a solemnity usually reserved for funerals. He appears in a waft of pipe smoke and self-importance, mustache bristling, eyes already scanning the room for signs of hysteria, women breathing, women blinking, women not swooning on cue. You're asked to describe your afflictions. The list is familiar: sleeplessness, general malaise, the urge to scream quietly into a cushion when your husband reads aloud from the Times. The doctor listens, nods, and then delivers his verdict with the gravity of a man diagnosing the plague. "It's hysteria," he explains, voice low, as if uttering the name of a family shame. The root cause, of course, is feminine excess or possibly intellectual exertion. Translation: you read a book last month, and now you're paying the price. He pulls out a well-worn notebook and begins the medical equivalent of Mad Libs. Do you experience sudden sadness? Sometimes. Are you agitated by loud noises, children, or the sight of your own reflection in harsh gaslight? Yes, obviously. But who isn't? He tuts, scribbles, and circles the word nerves, 3 times for emphasis. You realize this is less a medical consultation and more an exercise in 19th century gaslighting, minus the actual gas, which is reserved for lighting the chandelier and giving everyone a headache. The questions only get more personal. Do you find yourself overwhelmed by daily tasks, such as embroidering handkerchiefs, decanting sherry, or remembering the name of your fourth cousin's second wife? The answer is yes. It's always yes. Apparently, in Victorian England, emotional resilience is reserved for people who own land and never express opinions. While you're still reeling, the doctor launches into a description of hysteria's physical manifestations: palpitations, nervous tics, fits of laughter, spontaneous poetry, and, worst of all, thinking too much about anything. He assures you that your uterus is almost certainly to blame. It might be wandering, plotting rebellion, or simply pining for the fjords. No one really knows. The only certainty is that it's definitely not the result of boredom, frustration, or the suffocating weight of 19 layers of petticoats. You glance around the room for support, but everyone is studiously examining their teacups. Even the family dog looks away in embarrassment. The treatment, the doctor announces, is straightforward. Rest, abstain from anything stimulating, like novels or, God forbid, laughter, and prepare for a series of soothing interventions to be discussed later and delivered with clinical awkwardness. By the end of your consultation, you have a diagnosis, a lecture on the dangers of female imagination, and a sudden urge to flee to Switzerland. Victorian medicine, come for the science, stay for the blame. Your only real symptom? Living in a world where the answer is always, it's probably your uterus. You sit in a parlor with 3 nervous women, 2 palm-sized dogs, and at least 17 potted ferns. The wallpaper is so busy, it gives you a migraine before the doctor even arrives. No one makes eye contact. Everyone pretends the medical pamphlets don't mention pelvic congestion. The atmosphere is dense with secrets, and something else, dust, mostly. Victorian dust, the kind that's older than most countries and somehow immune to feather dusters. You can almost hear it whispering, "Welcome to the waiting room, where dignity and hope come to die." Every surface is smothered in velvet, every chair is too delicate for comfort, and the only thing harder than the furniture is the collective tension in the air. You glance around, taking stock of your competition. The woman nearest the window, pale as a ghost and clutching a lace handkerchief, stares into the middle distance as if she's calculating escape routes. Next to her is a matron in severe black bombazine, sighing with the weight of 1,000 disappointments, and a lifetime subscription to the Genteel Sufferer's Gazette. At her feet sits a lapdog with an expression that says, "I too have seen things." Farther down the settee, a young woman fidgets with her reticule, which, from the way she clutches it, may contain either smelling salts or state secrets. There's also a child, presumably left behind by a patient who checked herself into the sanatorium and never came back for her umbrella. The silence is a living thing. Occasionally it's broken by a cough, the squeak of patent leather, or the desperate rustling of a pamphlet titled, "Are you nervous? Or just difficult?" The only sound with any confidence is the relentless ticking of an ormolu clock, which marks time with the gravitas of a judge passing sentence. In this room, time is not on your side. It moves slowly, like treacle, or not at all, like your last 3 suitors. And then there are the ferns. Oh, the ferns. They are everywhere, on tables, in corners, hanging from the ceiling in elaborate macrame cradles. You suspect the doctor may be secretly cultivating an indoor jungle as a second career. Every so often, a stray frond brushes your shoulder, reminding you that in the Victorian ecosystem, plants have more rights than women. You're half convinced that the ferns are here to absorb the collective anxiety, or perhaps just to judge you quietly with their silent, leafy stare. Everyone here is pretending not to read the same article. Modern hysteria treatments for the discerning lady. The pamphlets promise relief, discretion, and a cure that doesn't involve leeches, though at this point you'd settle for a quiet death behind the umbrella stand. The boldest among you feign interest in last month's periodical, but your eyes keep drifting back to phrases like soothing manipulations and relaxation of female nerves. The meaning is as clear as mud, but the implications are unmistakable. No one wants to admit why they're really here, and yet you all know. It's an unspoken conspiracy of embarrassment. A bell rings somewhere in the distance, a signal that the doctor is ready to see his next patient, or possibly a warning that another fern has claimed a victim. The matron stiffens, the young woman's knuckles go white, and the lapdog emits a noise best described as existential dread in miniature. No one moves at first. To enter the doctor's office is to admit you have a problem. And in Victorian England, problems are meant to be endured quietly and attractively, if possible, while wearing kid gloves and a fixed, serene smile. Finally, the maid appears, her face set in the neutral mask of someone who's heard every confession and judged everyone. She calls the next name, and you watch as the young woman stands, smooths her skirts, and walks the green mile toward the parlor door. You exchange glances with the matron, half solidarity, half relief that it isn't you, not yet. You are left alone with the ferns, the clock, and your thoughts. The waiting continues. In this room, hope is rationed out in teaspoons, and the only thing growing faster than the foliage is your desire to run, preferably to a time and place where pelvic congestion is just something you fix with prune juice. There is a peculiar kind of tension reserved for meeting a Victorian doctor, and it begins the moment you hear the heavy footfall outside the waiting room. You brace yourself, fix your posture, and do your best to appear like a respectable patient and not a woman with nerves who's been caught reading poetry after supper. The door swings open, and in he comes. The living embodiment of medical authority, wielding a cane and the world's most confident mustache. He looks as if he's been constructed from tweed, wool, and misplaced optimism. His cheeks are flushed, his sideburns are engineered for wind resistance, and his gaze hovers somewhere between bored and professionally judgmental. The doctor's eyes scan the room, pausing on you with the same analytical concern he might show a slightly overripe pear. He tips his hat, a gesture both formal and faintly threatening, and introduces himself in tones designed to carry over fainting women and howling fireplaces. There is something about the presence of a Victorian physician that inspires both awe and a creeping sense of dread. His coat is immaculate, his collar so stiff you could slice bread with it, and pinned to his lapel is a watch chain more elaborate than most wedding rings. He shakes your hand as if testing for weakness, then sits behind a desk that threatens to buckle under the weight of medical journals, mysterious boxes, and at least 3 different brass instruments whose functions are never explained. He begins with pleasantries, but only the kind that leave you more anxious than reassured. "How are we this morning, Mrs. Prendergast? Not feeling too excitable, I hope?" he asks, already scribbling notes as if he's anticipated your answers since birth. You reply with something non-committal, after all. You wouldn't want to seem too emotional or, worse, too interesting. He launches into his routine, which is less about listening and more about identifying the ways your body and mind have failed to meet the exacting standards of 19th century medicine. His questions tumble out in a series of rapid-fire diagnoses. Do you experience sudden sadness when confronted with minor disappointments, such as burnt toast or the news that your husband will be home all day? Do you ever find yourself daydreaming, sighing at clouds, or wishing to travel somewhere scandalous, like Brighton? You nod along, trying to keep up with the logic, which seems to be equal parts guesswork and the desperate hope that no one asks about your last bowel movement. Each answer is recorded in a ledger so thick it could serve as a foundation for a new wing of the house. Occasionally, he murmurs, "Yes, yes, classic case," as if your very existence is the medical equivalent of a riddle he solved before lunch. At some point, he will quote Galen, Hippocrates, or, if he's feeling especially modern, Dr. Jean-Martin Charcot, whose theories on hysteria are both revolutionary and, it must be said, wildly speculative. You listen as the doctor explains that the female body is governed by mysterious forces, electrical, lunar, possibly spiritual. There is talk of uterine congestion, wandering womb, and nervous storms. You're almost impressed by the creativity. Almost. His tone grows grave as he warns against the perils of overstimulation. Too much reading, too much laughter, too much thinking. Any of these, he explains, can set the fragile female nervous system into a downward spiral, culminating in hysteria, neurasthenia, or, if you're especially unlucky, compulsive embroidery. All of which, apparently, require his personal attention. He offers comfort in the form of complicated Latin words and vague reassurance. Nothing to worry about, Mrs. Prendergast. With proper rest, abstention from excitement, and a little gentle intervention, you'll be yourself again. He smiles, but it's the sort of smile one might reserve for an invalid canary. You leave his office with a fresh prescription, a list of forbidden activities, including reading the newspaper, and a newfound respect for the power of a mustache to inspire both confidence and existential dread. In the hands of the Victorian doctor, misinformation isn't just a hazard. It's an art form, styled, waxed, and delivered with perfect bedside manner. The phrase medical exam conjures visions of privacy, professionalism, and perhaps a faint whiff of antiseptic. But in the hands of a Victorian doctor, it's more of a social event, one where everyone is invited, except your dignity. After you've been summoned from the ferns and fainting couches of the waiting room, you are ushered into an examining parlor that's only slightly less intimidating than a courtroom and at least 3 degrees colder. The decor is aggressively medical. Anatomical charts, a brass skeleton for educational purposes, or possibly as a warning, a fainting couch at a rakish angle, and a formidable collection of glass bottles with contents best left uninvestigated. There are medical diagrams everywhere, but none that actually explain anything. The centerpiece, however, is the doctor's examining couch, a sturdy but deeply suspicious structure that looks like it's already seen more drama than a full season of Downton Abbey. Your doctor gestures for you to take a seat, clearing his throat in a way that suggests he has never been truly comfortable in the presence of another living person. You gingerly settle onto the upholstery, hoping it's at least been dusted since the Crimean War. The air is thick with the scent of camphor and nervous anticipation. For reasons unclear, the maid is always hovering in the corner, pretending to polish a vase, but really bearing witness to your humiliation. Privacy, in Victorian medicine, is less a right and more a fond memory. The exam begins with a series of questions. Do you suffer from fatigue, melancholy, headaches, or the occasional urge to throw a sherry glass at the wall? The doctor nods sagely at each confession, jotting down notes in a handwriting that would stump even the best cryptographers. He inquires about your appetite, unreliable, your sleep, fitful, and your monthly complaint, always described in the vaguest possible terms, lest anyone be forced to acknowledge anatomy. Now comes the physical exam, a process both clinical and spectacularly awkward. The doctor checks your pulse with the gravity of a man reading his own will. He inspects your tongue, prods your wrists, and taps your knee, perhaps hoping to summon a sign from the gods of neurology. At one point, he asks you to relax completely, the most unrealistic request of the century, considering you're in a corset, under observation, and pondering whether diagnosed nerves can be inherited like fine china. He brings out various medical implements. A stethoscope, brand new and used with great ceremony. A reflex hammer wielded with the enthusiasm of a child with a toy. And, if you're unlucky, a device that vibrates and hums. allegedly for therapeutic stimulation of the nerves. Each tool is introduced with a vague, mumbled explanation about balancing your humors or restoring natural feminine flow, which makes as much sense as a chicken at a chess match. As the exam continues, the line between science and performance art begins to blur. The doctor's face shifts from concern to satisfaction and back again as he confirms, through his rituals, that you are indeed a victim of hysteria, or, failing that, substantial vapors. He dictates your symptoms to the maid, who records them in a ledger under categories like neurasthenic gloom and excessive sensibility. You wonder how much of this will be discussed at dinner, preferably in a tone of shocked discretion. Throughout the process, you are poked, prodded, and occasionally complimented on your robust complexion, which you suspect is code for alive, but not for long. The doctor reassures you that hysteria is a perfectly ordinary affliction for women of refinement. In fact, you should feel honored. It means you're sensitive, artistic, and possibly just too advanced for your own century. The exam ends at last. You're sent home with a slip of paper, a lecture on restorative silence, and the suspicion that your diagnosis has more to do with your taste in novels than any medical fact. In the world of the Victorian medical exam, privacy is an afterthought, science is a moving target, and nerves, yours and everyone else's, are always just on the verge of collapse. Congratulations, you qualify for treatment. Why? Because you feel tired sometimes, or irritable, or possibly had an independent thought. Hysteria covers everything from fainting and daydreaming to disagreeing with your husband. If you're a woman in Victorian England, odds are you're already sick. It begins, as all good Victorian maladies do, with a list. Your doctor, armed with his best quill and an air of grave importance, rattles off a cascade of symptoms that could generously be described as the human experience. Do you ever feel blue on a rainy Tuesday? Have you wept at a sad poem? Have you sighed while folding laundry? Or found yourself inexplicably drawn to the color mauve? That's hysteria, all of it. So insidious, so all-encompassing. It's a wonder the entire female population of England isn't currently hospitalized. Let's examine the classic symptoms. First up, nervousness. Not the usual sort that comes from meeting your mother-in-law or finding a spider in your boot, but the deeper, chronic, existential kind that seeps into your bones after 17 consecutive Sundays of boiled beef and spiritual disappointment. If you've ever felt anxious in a room full of strangers, congratulations, you have just become a textbook case. Next is fainting. Fainting, in Victorian England, is practically a competitive sport. Corsets help, of course, breathing is always optional, but so does the emotional roller coaster of being expected to maintain an unbroken aura of gentle serenity while the world trundles along in a cloud of coal dust and suppressed emotions. Whether you're swooning from a heated political debate or simply the sight of a robust wheel of Stilton, you're in excellent hysterical company. Then there's insomnia, a symptom so universal that it raises questions about whether sleep was ever a real thing, or just a rumor passed around by more optimistic generations. Your doctor will ask if you sleep soundly. You'll want to say, not since the Crimean War, but you settle for a demure, sometimes. This too is hysteria, especially if you're caught reading by candlelight at 2 a.m., which is considered dangerously modern and possibly French. Irritability is next. The ability to snap at a child, a spouse, or a particularly judgmental houseplant is, apparently, a sign of moral decline. The mere act of raising your voice to request less cabbage at dinner is enough to merit a double dose of whatever tincture is trending this week. For men, this is called having a bad day. For women, it's acute hysteria with possible complications. Creative pursuits are a symptom as well. Should you find yourself humming, painting, or, scandal of scandals, writing poetry, The diagnosis will be confirmed on the spot. Artistic expression is suspicious, possibly contagious, and generally discouraged unless it involves embroidery or heartfelt prayers for the Queen. But the real catch-all symptom is thinking. Are you plagued by opinions? Have you questioned the household accounts or, heaven forbid, the logic of your own diagnosis? This is a dangerous path. A woman who thinks is halfway to being a woman who acts. And the only thing more alarming to a Victorian physician than a thinking woman is two thinking women in the same room, possibly discussing abolition or the merits of indoor plumbing. As you listen to the doctor's litany of ills, you start to realize that what's being described is less an illness and more a checklist for sentience. The more you hear, the clearer it becomes. To exist is to be at risk. To feel is to be one step from the fainting couch. To dream, to create, to be annoyed by your husband's attempts at Latin, all of it medicalized. By the end of your examination, you have learned a simple truth. In Victorian England, health is suspicious and malaise is expected. You're prescribed rest, quiet, and a strict avoidance of any activity that might make life tolerable. Hysteria isn't a disease. It's the reward for surviving another day in a world allergic to female happiness. Here's where things get delicate. The treatment for hysteria involves your doctor's expert hands, a lot of awkward coughing, and a Victorian sense of medical detachment so fragile it could shatter at any moment. You try not to make eye contact. He tries not to notice that this isn't in the Hippocratic Oath. It begins with a gentle reminder to relax. You are ushered behind a floral screen, handed a linen sheet for modesty, and told reassuringly that everything about this procedure is entirely clinical, which is easy for the doctor to say, as he's the one in control of the gloves, the schedule, and the all-important window latch, opened just enough to let in the damp London air and the sound of distant horse traffic. Privacy is a suggestion, not a rule. The procedure is explained in medical terms so vague that even your aunt with the secret gin bottle would struggle to follow. There is talk of pelvic congestion, nervous relief, and the restoration of feminine equilibrium. You're told to focus on your breathing, or on a painting of a sheep-filled meadow conveniently hung at eye level, presumably to inspire innocence or a sense of pastoral detachment. You notice, with mounting dread, that the painting is slightly askew. The doctor, meanwhile, prepares for what can only be described as the most awkward appointment of his week. A week that likely already included removing chilblains, negotiating with a local chemist about laudanum pricing, and explaining for the 5th time that no, Mrs. Alderwick, onions do not cure gout. He dons a pair of thin gloves, coughs, and says, "You may feel a slight pressure." You try to imagine yourself somewhere else, perhaps Switzerland or the bottom of a very deep well. What follows is, according to Victorian medical literature, a pelvic massage. According to everyone else, it is one of the strangest encounters possible outside of a poorly planned séance. The doctor's approach is brisk but methodical, the way someone might knead dough or check the firmness of a melon in the market. You attempt to focus on your breathing, counting the seconds until this is all over. Or, ideally, you are struck by a sudden, merciful case of temporary amnesia. Somewhere in the background, the maid hums a hymn, a sound that mingles with the ticking clock and the rhythmic, wholly clinical motion of the doctor's hand. Time loses meaning. You are suspended in the uncanny valley between mortification and boredom, fighting the urge to apologize, laugh, or inquire whether this will be noted in your permanent medical record. The doctor, for his part, does not make conversation. Both of you are performing a delicate ballet of mutual denial after what feels like several hours, but is in reality a matter of minutes and 2 slightly embarrassed coughs. The procedure ends with the doctor announcing, "There we are. You may dress now." He offers you a glass of water, and a smile so strained it could be used to reinforce railway bridges. You retreat behind the floral screen, pulling your clothes on with a speed you did not know you possessed, grateful that at least your corset offers a sort of emotional armor. You are informed, as you gather your composure and what's left of your dignity, that you may experience relief in the coming days. If not, you are to return next week, or perhaps sooner, depending on your husband's travel schedule. You thank the doctor in tones normally reserved for undertakers, and make your escape, pausing only to avoid eye contact with the maid, who offers a knowing, silent nod. Manual therapy is, in the end, just another strange chapter in the story of Victorian medicine, a cure, as mysterious as the condition, prescribed by men who believed a wandering womb was best conquered by steady hands and a heroic capacity for not mentioning it at dinner. In a world of medical nonsense, at least this treatment delivers results, however awkwardly achieved. Tired of hand cramps, truly? Doctors invented the first electromechanical vibrator. Imagine a teapot crossed with a small lawnmower. It was loud, terrifying, and marketed as time-saving for the busy professional. The sound alone could cure half your symptoms. Let's step into the medical supply shop, circa 1880, a place that smells of camphor, coal, and pure male panic. After decades of doctors valiantly massaging their way through the entire upper crust of London, the medical establishment finally reached its breaking point. Victorian doctors, men whose hands were more used to holding cigars and cricket bats than engaging in pelvic therapy, began suffering from that most dreaded of all conditions, repetitive strain injury, carpal tunnel by another name. The stories spread quickly through medical circles. Old Dr. Forrester, unable to grip his fountain pen. Young Dr. Merton, forced to retire after a severe cramping of the knuckles. It was a crisis of epic and slightly hilarious proportions. The solution, in classic Victorian fashion, was to mechanize the problem. Enter the electromechanical vibrator, a device with the subtlety of a foghorn and the discretion of a brass band. The early models were massive, tabletop affairs, more steam engine than self-care. The prototype, called the Granville's hammer, looked like a cross between a dentist's drill and a torture device from the Tower of London. It required 2 men to carry, a nurse to operate the foot pedal, and a strong sense of denial from everyone involved. Doctors lined up for demonstrations at medical conferences, where bearded men in frock coats debated the optimal speed for paroxysmal relief. The language was technical and very, very serious. A triumph of modern medicine, they'd declare, over the thrum of an engine that could easily power a paddle boat. The device made such a racket that patients sometimes left the surgery more anxious than when they'd arrived, convinced the cure for hysteria was simply being startled into good health. Home versions followed, of course. Because what Victorian market wouldn't leap at the chance to sell an embarrassing device to every family with a drawing room and a heavy velvet curtain? Advertisements popped up in women's magazines, all coded language and winking euphemism. For the ladies' comfort, they promised. Brings quick relief to all household nerves. The illustrations showed a serene woman reclining on a chaise, eyes closed, while an enormous apparatus hovered somewhere out of frame, presumably rattling the windows and scaring the parlour cat. If the doctor's office had been awkward, at home the device was an exercise in denial and logistical planning. The household staff had to be scheduled around treatment time, the coalman paid extra for the additional fuel, and the family electrician kept on retainer for inevitable blown fuses. Privacy was still mostly imaginary, but at least you didn't have to explain your doctor's hand cramps at Sunday lunch. The technology quickly outpaced the etiquette. By the turn of the century, smaller and slightly less horrifying versions appeared. Handheld, battery-powered, and with at least 2 pages of legal disclaimers about not using them near bathtubs or livestock. Manufacturers insisted on the medical necessity. recommended by over 500 London physicians, they'd brag. No one ever asked the physicians' wives. The social awkwardness reached its peak when a dinner guest, having heard the distinctive whir from the upstairs sitting room, asked if the family was having some renovations done. "Just treating my nerves," you'd reply, with a thin smile and a death grip on your teacup. Every woman in the room would nod, silently united in the world's strangest secret. In the end, the vibrator was a marvel of innovation and absurdity. It solved the doctor's hand cramps, revolutionized hysteria treatment, and added a note of mechanical terror to the Victorian household. It may not have cured anyone's nerves for good, but it did ensure that, for the first time in medical history, progress could be measured in horsepower, decibels, and a discreet knock at the parlor door. You leave your appointment clutching a prescription for rest, light gardening, and regular manual therapy. And you wonder if it's covered by your new health plan. At least it's better than leeches or a month locked in a sanatorium, probably. Back in the Victorian parlor, you unfold the doctor's prescription as if it might reveal a map to hidden treasure. Instead, you're faced with a list that reads like the greatest hits of medical guesswork. One glance and you realize the modern pharmacy has nothing on this era's enthusiasm for cure-alls. Victorian physicians had a prescription pad and absolutely no shame in using it for everything from mild nerves to existential crises. At the top, of course, is bed rest. The reigning queen of 19th century medicine, the solution for everything from heartbreak to hangnail. You are ordered to retire to your bedroom, preferably with the curtains drawn, your feet elevated, and absolutely no access to anything resembling excitement. Reading novels? Dangerous. Writing letters? Risky. Laughing out loud? Highly suspect, especially if it's not at your husband's jokes. Friends may visit to offer moral support but must never bring up politics, the Irish question, or the latest episode of unmarried women doing anything in public. Next up, light gardening. Prescribed with the gravity of a heart surgeon, light gardening is Victorian code for do something outdoorsy but not too outdoorsy. You're encouraged to deadhead the roses, repot the ferns, and possibly talk to a squirrel if you encounter one. No digging, no sweating, and definitely no running. The idea is to commune with nature just long enough to feel restored, but not so long that you get sunburnt, stung, or a new opinion about vegetables. Then there's the recurring recommendation for manual therapy. No matter how many times you hear it, it doesn't get less awkward. The doctor phrases it clinically, but the details are very much not. You're to report for treatment 2 to 3 times a week. More if your symptoms are particularly persistent. You wonder if you're supposed to keep a diary. Tuesday, nerves still present. Wednesday, vibrator jammed again. Thursday, much improved. Must buy more coal. Sometimes, if your doctor's feeling creative, he'll throw in a tonic or cordial, a syrupy concoction of herbs, spices, and enough alcohol to power a small ferry across the Thames. The label assures you it restores the feminine bloom, but the real effect is that you sleep through your husband's evening reading of parliamentary proceedings. Other popular prescriptions include cod liver oil, a weekly visit to the Turkish bath, and the ever-cryptic avoid overstimulation. This includes strong cheese, heavy opera, and thinking about the colonies. For those with truly stubborn cases, the doctor might recommend a trip to the seaside. Salt air, bracing walks, and absolutely no swimming, lest you catch aquatic palpitations. You're prescribed boredom in beautiful settings. It's a medical theory that would make a modern insurance company weep with joy. Every so often, the prescription pad takes a dark turn. If symptoms persist, consider consulting a specialist. Translation: prepare for a second opinion and possibly a month at the Sanatorium, where you will enjoy a strict regimen of boiled meat, tepid baths, and staring at the same seagull for 6 hours a day. You look at the sheet, weighing your options. Will you embrace the ritual of daily rest and lavender compresses, Or will you rebel and sneak a novel under your pillow, risking full-blown scandal? It's a game of prescription pad roulette, one where the only sure winner is your doctor, who collects a fee each time he scrawls continue therapy as needed. In the end, you tuck the prescription into your reticule, step into the faint English sunlight, and ponder whether light gardening or a bracing tonic will truly cure what ails you. One thing's for sure. The only thing more unpredictable than Victorian medicine is Victorian life itself. And at least your new treatment plan is unlikely to involve leeches. Probably. The only thing more popular than hysteria treatments was prescribing bed rest. You are sentenced to 3 weeks in a dark room with nothing but broth, old magazines, and a daily visit from Dr. Handcrank. You consider faking recovery just to see daylight. Let's set the scene. You have been banished to your bedroom, not the sunny one with the bay window and the dog, but the sick room, a chamber designed for maximum inactivity and minimum stimulation. The drapes are drawn, the fire smoulders sullenly in the grate, and the air is thick with lavender sachets, camphor, and the sound of your own stifled despair. Your world shrinks to a space the size of a shipping trunk and the color palette of weak tea. The first rule of the rest cure: absolutely no exertion. You are to remain horizontal, motionless, and preferably as silent as possible, so as not to risk aggravating your nerves. The doctor's orders are strict. No reading, no writing, and certainly no correspondence with the outside world. The most daring activity allowed is staring at the ceiling and wondering if the cracks resemble the map of Wales or the slow collapse of your sanity. Meals arrive with all the fanfare of a funeral. A tray is delivered 3 times a day by a maid who has been trained to move like a ghost. Breakfast is lukewarm porridge, lunch is watery broth, and dinner is a piece of white fish so bland it could pass as an apology. Between meals, your only visitors are relatives who peer in anxiously and ask, "Are you feeling any better?" before retreating in terror when you mention the word stimulation. The true villain of the rest cure, however, is boredom. You rapidly exhaust your internal supply of thoughts. You memorize every pattern in the wallpaper. You count the number of times the maid coughs, 37, the number of times the fire needs poking, 12, and the number of days since you last saw your own reflection, don't ask. If you're lucky, someone leaves you a stack of gently used periodicals, last year's fashion, last decade's news, and crossword puzzles with all the answers already filled in. You read and reread these until you know more about Victorian beet farming than any person ought. Sleep comes, but not as a gentle friend. More as a bored acquaintance who visits only when there is nothing left to discuss. Insomnia haunts your nights, partly from anxiety, partly from the unending nap that is your daily schedule. When you do drift off, your dreams are a collage of dull wallpaper, tepid soup, and the endless, echoing phrase, "Complete rest is required." Occasionally, Dr. Handcrank, as you now refer to him privately, with only a touch of malice, visits for your scheduled treatment. He arrives with a brisk knock and a well-practiced air of detachment, delivers your therapy with a sense of duty, and vanishes before you can even ask for a deck of cards or a crossword that isn't about turnip varietals. Your dignity remains, but only just. Should you dare to complain, you are gently but firmly reminded that rest is for your own good. After all, overexcitement can lead to acute vapors or, heaven forbid, an independent opinion. You learn to feign serenity, adopting a look of saintly patience each time someone checks in to see if your nerves have recovered or if you are merely bored into compliance. And yet deep down you understand why the rest cure is so popular. It's the only prescription that guarantees you won't accidentally form an opinion, write a manifesto, or run away to the seaside. Your family, your doctor, and your ferns are all reassured. You, on the other hand, are counting the hours until you're allowed to rejoin the land of the living, even if it means facing Victorian society again. So you lie back, close your eyes, And imagine a world where the rest cure comes with Wi-Fi, central heating, and snacks that taste like more than resignation. Until then, you'll have to settle for patience, bland soup, and the hope that one day soon, the doctor will prescribe a walk in the garden, or at least a magazine from this decade. If the home treatments don't work, it's off to the sanatorium, a place with more marble statues than food, endless silence, and hourly reminders that you are being treated for your own good. It's like a spa, if your idea of luxury is solitary confinement and beef tea. Your first impression is one of cold grandeur. The sanatorium is a vast manor house set behind iron gates, surrounded by lawns that exist solely for looking at. A carriage drops you at the door, and you're greeted by a matron so severe she could curdle cream at 30 paces. The entrance hall is lined with potted palms, busts of stern physicians, and a guest book that hasn't been signed since the Crimean War. The silence is impressive, so complete you can almost hear your own nerves humming in protest. You're shown to your room, which is both elegant and designed for observation. The bed is narrow and high, the sheets tucked in with military precision. There's a chair in the corner, perfect for a nurse to supervise your rest periods, and a small table stacked with religious tracts and back issues of The Lancet. The wallpaper is a faint pattern of vines that, if stared at long enough, might reveal the meaning of life, or at least a recipe for escaping through the laundry chute. The daily schedule is a masterpiece of monotony. You're awakened at dawn by the tolling of a distant bell, followed by a breakfast of oat porridge so watery it might technically qualify as a beverage. After breakfast, it's time for supervised rest. This is not to be confused with sleeping, it's more a state of enforced inactivity, carefully monitored by staff members who take notes whenever you sigh or shift positions. If you attempt conversation, you're encouraged to practice restful silence, which is doctor speak for don't bother the staff. Therapy sessions punctuate your day like commas in a poorly written sentence. There's hydrotherapy, where you're wrapped in damp sheets and left to contemplate the meaning of existence, and electrotherapy, which involves mild shocks, polite apologies, and a sense of gratitude that you're not actually being treated for ghosts. The most anticipated appointment, of course, is your scheduled visit from Dr. Handcrank, whose manner is always brisk and whose conversation is always about the weather. Meals are a highlight, mostly because they mark the passage of time. Lunch consists of boiled mutton and potatoes boiled into compliance, while dinner features beef tea, a Victorian concoction somewhere between broth and a dare. If you're lucky, there's a stewed prune for dessert. Eating is a quiet affair, punctuated by the clinking of spoons and the distant, haunted sobs of someone who's just realized the pudding is made of turnip again. Exercise is strictly regulated. You are permitted a short stroll in the garden each afternoon, always under the watchful eye of a nurse who walks 2 paces behind, ready to intervene should you attempt to make a break for the rhododendrons. Reading material is heavily censored. Novels are replaced by approved pamphlets on the importance of female docility and, for some reason, surprisingly detailed biographies of Queen Victoria's dogs. Evenings are spent in the common room, where patients sit in silence or work on embroidery projects so intricate they could double as escape maps. Conversation is subdued, laughter rare, and the fire burns low, as if even the logs are under doctor's orders to avoid excitement. As the days blur together, you realize the sanatorium isn't about healing so much as perfecting the art of gentle captivity. The doctors call it restorative discipline. You call it an elaborate way to avoid letting women get bored and start revolutions. Either way, your nerves are in good company, and at least the ferns are thriving. Marriage is supposed to be bliss, but in Victorian England it's just another trigger for hysteria. Husbands are given pamphlets on proper spousal support, which they promptly ignore in favor of golf. Spoiler: marital relations do not count as therapy, unless you're paying extra. Let's be honest. Victorian marriage is less about moonlit walks and more about joint property management with bonus lace curtains. The ceremony is grand, the cake is dry, and the vows are mostly promises not to faint during Sunday service. On paper, marriage is meant to cure all ills, especially for women. After all, what could be more soothing than sharing your life with a man who's only marginally more attentive than your houseplants? But for the newly diagnosed hysteric, marriage is just another item on the list of possible causes. Doctors explain it with clinical detachment. Married women, they claim, are prone to uterine exhaustion, conjugal malaise, and domestic overstimulation. The solution? A mix of rest, marital duty, and, if things get truly dire, a visit to the doctor for a bit of manual relief. If only all marriages came with a helpful user manual, or at least a warranty. Your husband, meanwhile, is baffled by the whole business. The idea that his wife might be suffering from her nerves is as foreign as boiled kale at a banquet. Husbands are sometimes gently instructed to avoid unnecessary excitement, which he interprets as, say, less, nap more. Advice columns urge men to show sympathy, but not too much, lest it provoke further symptoms. The resulting support generally consists of a pat on the shoulder and a quick return to the billiards room. The social pressure is relentless. Married women are expected to exude serenity, gratitude, and the ability to organize a dinner party while also giving birth, embroidering 6 samplers, and never once expressing an opinion about the price of mutton. If you complain, you risk being labeled a nag. If you don't, you end up at the doctor's office with a prescription for rest and more awkward appointments than your marriage license prepared you for. Hysteria, in the married state, is a delicate topic. On one hand, you're told that marital congress should keep your humors balanced and your spirits lifted. On the other, you're warned against too much excitement, too many conjugal visits, too much laughter at the dinner table, or, heaven forbid, expressing any enjoyment in the process. The paradox is enough to make even the sturdiest Victorian faint gently onto the nearest brocade ottoman. Enter the most intimate prescription: manual therapy, prescribed as regularly as church attendance. The doctor, armed with gloves and a brisk bedside manner, is summoned to restore what the marriage has, apparently, depleted. There's an unspoken understanding that whatever happens in the parlor stays in the parlor, and if anyone asks, you're receiving treatment for the nerves. The fact that this treatment makes everyone blush from the vicar to the family spaniel is just one more thing never, ever discussed. Occasionally, you receive a pamphlet, Advice for the Overwrought Wife, suggesting gentle exercise, tepid baths, and, as always, avoidance of undue excitement. The illustrations show a woman staring serenely into the middle distance, wearing a shawl and the haunted expression of someone who's just remembered she left her dignity in the waiting room. Meanwhile, your mother-in-law recommends more fresh air, while your best friend whispers about the latest advances in electrotherapy. As the weeks go by, you settle into a routine: rest, appointments, and the gentle art of pretending nothing is wrong. You smile at your husband over the dinner table, make polite conversation with his colleagues, and dutifully decline a third helping of suet pudding. The more you comply, the more you wonder if the real cure for hysteria is simply lowering your expectations to sea level. At the end of the day, married women in Victorian England learn to navigate the maze of expectations with grace, patience, and a healthy dose of strategic denial. You might not find bliss, but with enough rest, restraint, and the occasional doctor's visit, you just might survive marriage. One treatment at a time. Unmarried? Living alone? You're at high risk for uterine rebellion, which sounds like a punk band but is actually just Victorian code for loneliness, and no one to gaslight you daily. The cure? A prescription for marriage, or, vigorous medical massage. The unmarried woman in Victorian England is a creature both pitied and feared. On one hand, she's spared the rigors of conjugal life and childbearing. On the other, she's regarded with deep suspicion by neighbors, doctors, and, most distressingly, her own family. Every time she sneezes, sighs, or expresses interest in reading something besides a hymnal, someone mutters about the dangers of excessive solitude. Spinsterhood, as they call it, is not just a civil status. It's a diagnosis waiting to happen. Medical pamphlets circulate like scandalous rumors, warning of the perils facing women who refuse to marry, nervous excitement, wandering thoughts, and the ever-terrifying pelvic congestion. If your uterus hasn't wandered yet, it's only because it's been carefully monitored by your mother's eagle eye and the local vicar's weekly visits. A single woman is expected to devote herself to worthy causes, charity work, mending church linens, and generally being seen and not heard. Her existence is meant to be dignified, restrained, and always just slightly apologetic. Should she develop an interest in travel, botany, or, heaven forbid, mathematics, the doctor is summoned to check for signs of disordered passions. A spinster with a hobby is a public health risk, and a spinster with opinions is practically grounds for quarantine. The family, meanwhile, is in a state of constant, low-grade panic. Every unmarried daughter, sister, or aunt is a problem waiting for a solution. The polite ones encourage fresh air and healthy exercise. The desperate ones recommend Dr. Handcrank and his discreet parlour, and the truly practical simply start matchmaking with the determination of a general planning a siege. The message is clear. Left unchecked, single women might start reading, thinking, or organising other single women. Who knows where that could lead? Votes for women, probably, and then the end of civilization as we know it. The doctor's prescription is always the same. First, a lengthy lecture on the benefits of married life, emotional stability, proper regulation of the humours, and, most importantly, the ever-watchful eye of a man to prevent dangerous flights of fancy. If no suitable husband is available, alternative treatments are recommended: long walks, supervised social events, and of course, regular visits for manual therapy to ensure the healthy circulation of feminine energy. No one ever says what that energy is, but the pamphlets are very clear about the importance of keeping it under control. The irony is inescapable. The more single women are warned against nerves, the more nervous they become. The very act of avoiding spinster's malaise practically guarantees its onset. By the third round of advice, even the ferns look anxious. Despite all this, spinsters persist. They build quiet networks of friendship, support each other in subtle rebellion, and sometimes even manage to laugh at the absurdity of it all, behind closed doors, naturally, and only after the vicar has gone home. The risk of uterine rebellion is high, but so is the reward: a life with moments of true autonomy, however brief or hidden. So the next time someone mentions spinster peril, remember, surviving as a single woman in Victorian England was less about nerves and more about the daily triumph of keeping your sense of humour, your independence, and your uterus firmly in place. Victorian doctors really believed the uterus could wander around the body, causing all manner of trouble. Every symptom is blamed on this rogue organ, never mind actual medical science. If your left eyebrow twitches, it's probably your womb's fault. It starts with a sigh, or maybe a sneeze. One day you're folding linens. The next, your mother insists you look peaked. By nightfall, the family physician is summoned, and after an exhaustive round of questions, do you feel a strange heaviness in the feet? Have you been startled by the sound of church bells? Did you recently think too hard about Greek mythology? He declares that your womb has grown restless. The only cure? A regimen of rest, gentle tonics, and vigilance against sudden noises. The wandering womb theory is one of Victorian medicine's greatest hits, though its origins go back to ancient Greece. By the 19th century, it's been updated with extra embroidery, ominous Latin names, and a complete disregard for anatomy. According to the pamphlets, a womb can roam up to your lungs, threaten your brain, and make pit stops at your spleen if left unsupervised. For something described as delicate, the Victorian uterus is portrayed as both adventurous and deeply inconsiderate, a sort of internal vagabond that never writes or calls. Of course, the prescribed treatments are as absurd as the diagnosis. If the doctor suspects your womb is wandering northward, he may recommend lying with your feet elevated and a warm poultice on your abdomen to coax it back home. Sometimes, aromatic herbs are waved under your nose, not to calm you, but to lure the uterus with the promise of familiar scents. The boldest practitioners might even suggest singing softly, as if your reproductive system just needs a comforting lullaby to remember its place. Daily life becomes a cautious affair. You are instructed to avoid sudden movements, startling news, or any activity that might confuse the womb. Jumping up to rescue a runaway chicken is strictly forbidden. Dancing is discouraged unless supervised by a matron and at least 2 witnesses. Even laughter must be managed in small, ladylike doses. One hearty chuckle could send your womb off to explore your left elbow. If symptoms persist, a more interventionist approach is suggested. Doctors propose pelvic massage, herbal tinctures, and, in some cases, brief exposure to fainting salts to shock the womb into submission. Your entire family becomes invested in the project. Aunt Mildred hovers, armed with lavender sachets. The housemaid monitors the temperature of your slippers. Your father looks vaguely terrified any time you sneeze. In short, you become the center of a household operation designed to keep one organ in line, as if the rest of you is just a well-upholstered waiting room. The wandering womb becomes an excuse for everything. If you're tired, it's your womb. If you want a second helping of pudding, it's your womb. If you finish a book too quickly or speak your mind at dinner, your womb is clearly staging a coup. It's the ultimate catch-all, a handy explanation for every quirk, emotion, or act of resistance a woman might display. Eventually, the phase passes. Either your symptoms resolve, or everyone gets distracted by a new scandal involving Mrs. Bostwick's unfortunate incident with the washtub. You are pronounced well enough, your womb presumably back in its designated spot, and life resumes, with only the mild fear that at any moment your reproductive organs might once again take an unscheduled holiday. Such was the journey of the wandering womb. A diagnosis that led nowhere, solved nothing, and kept women firmly in their place, feet up, voice down, and always just one laugh away from medical mayhem. Can't afford daily doctor visits. The home-use device market explodes. You can now order your very own medico-electrical massager, guaranteed to restore feminine balance, or at least give you something to hide under your mattress when the vicar visits. For the Victorian woman, bringing medical treatments into the home means an entirely new set of anxieties, some involving modesty, most involving electricity. Your first introduction to the world of self-care arrives in a discreet brown box, unmarked except for the address and a faint scent of camphor. The family butler, trained in the art of pretending nothing is ever strange, sets it quietly on your nightstand. You eye it with both hope and horror. The instruction manual, printed in microscopic type, claims the device is the pinnacle of modern science. It features diagrams, testimonials, and warnings to keep away from household pets and all forms of running water. The massager itself is equal parts brass, mahogany, and hubris, a hand crank, several attachments, and a small booklet on the theory of nerves. There is a caution about not operating the device during thunderstorms, presumably to avoid summoning the spirit of Benjamin Franklin or electrocuting yourself into Victorian folklore. Operating the massager requires determination and, ideally, a household staff that knows how to mind their own business. You arrange your bedroom for privacy. Drapes pulled, doors locked, and the family parrot relocated so it won't learn any new vocabulary. The procedure itself is never discussed openly, but everyone in the house recognizes the signs. The whir of clockwork, the faint smell of singed linen, and the sudden need for extra coal. If you're lucky, the device works quickly, and you emerge from your room flushed and restored. If not, you battle hand cramps, tangled wires, and the existential dread of explaining to the maid why there's a burn mark on the pillowcase. The manufacturer recommends frequent use as often as nerves demand and includes a chart to track your progress. It is both reassuring and mortifying, a true testament to Victorian efficiency. Household treatments don't end with machines. Herbal remedies abound. You're advised to steep chamomile for calm, lavender for rest, and, in extreme cases, valerian root, guaranteed to taste like regret and leave you slightly drowsy for hours. There are also recommended compresses, warm baths, and for advanced cases, the soothing application of leeches. One pamphlet cheerfully promises results without the need for public embarrassment. Another simply suggests a brisk walk and denial. Of course, discretion is everything. Heaven forbid the neighbours learn you've received a delivery from Dr. Fothergill's medico-electrical works. Gossip travels at the speed of sound in Victorian England, and the only thing more scandalous than being a woman with nerves is being a woman who treats them herself. Every household develops its own code for these matters. I'm feeling delicate today means the parlour is off limits. I have a headache is met with knowing nods and the quiet shutting of doors. There is a constant background dread. The vicar's unexpected call, the housemaid's raised eyebrow, your mother-in-law's questions about why you require so many batteries. You live in fear of being discovered, not for any crime, but for the simple act of self-care. Even victory is bittersweet. No one congratulates you for a successful treatment, and the only applause comes from the family cat, who is just happy to have the warm spot back. Home treatments are Victorian compromise at its finest. You cure your nerves with a machine that could double as a sewing engine, keep secrets better than a statesman, and, if all else fails, master the art of looking serene no matter what's humming under the covers. Victorian advice columns are a goldmine of bad ideas, half-baked medical tips, and scandalized women writing in with questions about nervous excitement. Every issue promises a cure. Every cure involves an embarrassing purchase. Victorian advice columns are a goldmine of bad ideas, half-baked medical tips, and scandalized women writing in with questions about nervous excitement. Every issue promises a cure. Every cure involves an embarrassing purchase. The ritual begins with the post, an elegant envelope, hand-delivered to your breakfast table, nestled between your husband's grim newspaper and an offer for discounted beef tea. You open the latest edition of the Ladies' Home Companion, eager to read something, anything, not written by a clergyman or a distant cousin. The magazine's pages are filled with engravings of beaming women pouring tea and advice from Miss Prudence, whose credentials are as mysterious as her marital status. Advice columns headline every issue: How to Banish Vapors, Cultivating Dignity, and Questions of the Heart and Liver. You and every woman you know secretly pore over the letters. Dear Miss Prudence, writes Mrs. S., is it true that reading novels can lead to night sweats and nervous unrest? Miss Prudence assures her that with proper supervision and perhaps a daily tablespoon of beef extract, she will remain both virtuous and hydrated. Advertisements cluster at the bottom of every page. Here, the real action happens. Dr. Pym's marvelous restorative tonic promises to settle the female system, invigorate the blood, and promote a cheerful disposition. Ingredients are a mystery, but the testimonials, "I have not fainted since Christmas," are glowing. Next to that, an ad for the personal rejuvenator, a device illustrated only in silhouette, described as absolutely necessary for the modern lady. No one ever says what it does, but everyone seems to want one. The letters get bolder as the months roll by. One anxious correspondent confesses, "When my nerves feel overwrought, I retreat to my room for gentle exercise with my mechanical companion." Is this proper? Miss Prudence responds with delicate evasiveness and a reminder to keep all windows curtained and all servants well paid. Beyond the advice, there are serialized stories of women nearly undone by nerves, only to be saved by a judicious application of Mr. Balmforth's electric ointment or the wise counsel of an older, married friend. These stories always end in restored harmony, with the family gathered around a well-fortified tea tray, and not a single person mentioning the word hysteria. You compare notes with your friends over tepid tea and dry sponge cake. Did you read the latest? Mrs. Periwinkle claims to have conquered her pelvic congestion by standing on one leg at sunrise and eating only boiled cabbage for a week. Your cousin tried the recommended foot baths and now swears she's never felt more robust. The less said about her new affinity for galvanic belts, the better. Yet, beneath the jokes and winks, these magazines provide a lifeline, a secret space for confession and advice, a rare acknowledgement that other women also spend their evenings worrying about the color of their tongues or the social consequences of sneezing in church. The coded language, the elliptical references, the elaborate recipes for nerve tonics, these are tools for surviving a world that refuses to talk plainly. As you fold the magazine and slip it under your cushion, you can't help but feel both comforted and slightly mortified. Everyone is searching for a cure, everyone is whispering the same questions, and everyone, it seems, is just one ad away from buying a mysterious vibrating device and telling the vicar it's for the nerves. So the next time you read an advice column promising tranquility in 3 easy installments, remember, you're not alone, you're just one among a long line of women looking for answers, and occasionally a discreet return address. Some enterprising doctors offer group sessions, think Tupperware party, but with more shame and less kitchenware. You find yourself sipping tepid tea, listening to Mrs. Partridge describe her recovery while you silently debate moving to France. Some enterprising doctors offer group sessions, think Tupperware party, but with more shame and less kitchenware. You find yourself sipping tepid tea, listening to Mrs. Partridge describe her recovery while you silently debate moving to France. It all starts with an invitation delivered on the kind of creamy cardstock usually reserved for funerals or the annual church bazaar. You open it with trembling hands, half expecting a call to prayer, but instead it reads, "Dr. Templeton cordially invites you to an afternoon of restorative conversation and gentle therapy. Light refreshments served." Translation: there will be tea, there will be talk, and there will definitely be more than one woman who claims her life was changed by a brisk session with the mechanical massager. On the appointed day, you arrive in a drawing room arranged for maximum discretion and minimum comfort. The curtains are drawn, the fire is lit, regardless of season, and every flat surface is covered in ferns, pamphlets, or trays of cucumber sandwiches so thin they seem theoretical. You spot several familiar faces, neighbors, cousins, and the local vicar's wife, who looks as though she's trying to merge with the wallpaper. No one meets anyone's eye for more than 3 seconds. The proceedings begin with Dr. Templeton clearing his throat and launching into a speech about the importance of feminine harmony and the marvels of modern medicine. The language is impossibly vague, heavy on words like nerves, relief, and delicate constitutions. The implication, as always, is that any woman present could topple over into a fit of hysteria at any moment, and it's a miracle anyone is upright at all. Next come the testimonials. Mrs. Partridge, a woman whose main hobbies are gossip and fainting, stands to describe her remarkable improvement after 6 sessions with Dr. Templeton's patented method. Her cheeks are pink, her eyes are bright, and she thanks the doctor with the gravity usually reserved for returning war heroes. Other ladies nod, some enviously, others with a look of grim resignation. Someone mentions how effective the treatment is, though everyone avoids explaining what exactly happens behind the parlor screen. Meanwhile, the tea is poured in tiny, trembling increments. The sandwiches are consumed in awkward silence. The air is thick with the scent of anxiety, bergamot, and the unspoken knowledge that by tomorrow, every detail will be circulating through the town like a contagious rash. If you're lucky, Mrs. Partridge's glowing testimonial will take center stage. If not, it will be your own name whispered over fence posts and at the bakery. In between demonstrations of the portable electric restorative, which looks suspiciously like a coffee grinder attached to a sewing machine, women are invited to sign up for private consultations. There is a polite scramble for the clipboard. No one wants to look too eager, but no one wants to be last. It's the social equivalent of musical chairs, but with more petticoats and existential dread. By the end of the afternoon, you've eaten 3 cucumber sandwiches, signed up for a discreet appointment, and developed a sudden, passionate interest in continental travel. Dr. Templeton hands out pamphlets and thanks everyone for their courage and candor. No one mentions the underlying sense of embarrassment, or the fact that the family dog has been nervously hiding under the piano for the last hour. As you collect your coat and your composure, you realize hysteria parties are the apex of Victorian awkwardness. A room full of anxious women, a table full of nerve tonics, and the unspoken hope that someone, somewhere, will finally invent therapy that involves more cake and less explanation. Word gets around. Suddenly, everyone knows about your diagnosis, your prescription, and the fact that Dr. Henshaw's waiting room has more foot traffic than the grocer's. You become the subject of endless, stifled giggles and pointed stares at the market. Word gets around. Suddenly, everyone knows about your diagnosis, your prescription, and the fact that Dr. Henshaw's waiting room has more foot traffic than the grocer's. You become the subject of endless, stifled giggles and pointed stares at the market. It's not long before you realize that, in Victorian England, the greatest threat to your reputation isn't illness or even the doctor's bill. It's the rumour mill, perpetually churning just out of sight. News travels with unholy speed down the hedgerow and across the tea tables. One day, you're a respectable woman with a robust appreciation for lavender sachets. The next, you're that poor dear with the nerves, whispered about in tones of delighted pity. You notice it first in the way people greet you. Mrs. Ellison's handshake is a little too warm, her smile a little too understanding. The vicar's wife offers to pray for your restoration, and your neighbour, Mrs. Bartlett, starts sending you unsolicited herbal teas in brown paper packets labelled, "For your delicate constitution." Every cough is met with a chorus of theirs, and every yawn with a knowing nod. You suspect even the local grocer is in on it, slipping you extra oranges for your health and winking in a way that suggests he knows more about your therapy schedule than you do. The gossip comes in 2 main flavors: concern and comedy. The first is a performance of earnest sympathy. People clutch their pearls, lower their voices, and speculate about your difficulties. They pass along half-remembered medical advice. Have you tried standing on your head before breakfast? And stories about relatives who made a full recovery after 3 weeks on boiled milk and silence. Their letters are full of prayers and practical suggestions. Sometimes, you're even made the subject of Sunday sermons on fortitude and the mysterious ways of providence. The second flavor is much more fun for everyone else. Children snicker as you pass, pretending to swoon into ditches. At card parties, the conversation veers dangerously close to the subject of manual therapy, and someone inevitably makes a joke about the doctor's strong wrists. Friends and acquaintances alike find your nerves hilarious, especially after their third glass of sherry. You begin to dread family gatherings, where even your uncle, who once mistook a turnip for his hat, feels qualified to offer medical advice. No matter how hard you try to remain dignified, the social consequences of a hysteria diagnosis are relentless. The invitations slow. You are quietly removed from the choir's soprano section to give your voice a rest. Children are encouraged not to play too loudly near your house, and the family dog starts receiving more social invitations than you do. You become the punchline to jokes you never hear and the inspiration for cautionary tales told to daughters who sigh too heavily or read too many French novels. There's also the more insidious kind of judgment, the sort that arrives on a tray with weak tea and a slice of fruitcake. Friends reassure you that everyone suffers sometimes, but their eyes slide away from yours. Relatives shake their heads over your unmarried cousin, wondering aloud if she'll be next. The message is clear. Hysteria is catching, if not by germs, then by example. Yet through it all, you persevere. You learn to smile with quiet defiance, to take the extra oranges and herbal teas as tribute, and to develop a repertoire of polite excuses for every invitation you no longer wish to accept. After all, if you're going to be the subject of gossip, you may as well enjoy the perks. A little extra rest, a break from choir practice, and all the oranges you can carry. In the end, the social cost of hysteria is steep, but it comes with a side of free fruit and the kind of notoriety you simply can't buy at the chemist. Every now and then, a man develops hysteria. The treatment? Less massage, more public shaming, and, if things get serious, a hunting trip. Victorian logic. Men are cured by fresh air, women by medical attention. The diagnosis of hysteria among men is a rarity, about as common as a teetotaler at a bachelor's party. After all, the medical establishment spends most of its time assuring everyone that hysteria is a disease of the uterus. And, to their eternal relief, men are entirely unencumbered by such an organ. But every so often, the impossible happens. A gentleman faints at the opera, develops mysterious nerves, or is found weeping in the conservatory over the loss of a favoured waistcoat, and suddenly, the household is thrown into disarray. The family physician is called, his eyebrow already raised to a skeptical altitude. He examines the afflicted man, usually a junior solicitor or a colonel recently retired from active service, and performs a cursory assessment, pulse, tongue, a quick review of recent business losses or heartbreaks. The verdict is given in a tone both embarrassed and defensive. A touch of nervous exhaustion, he pronounces, scribbling on his pad and making very sure not to write the word hysteria. He recommends rest and manly pursuits, preferably somewhere out of sight. While the ladies are packed off to bed and massaged into oblivion, the male sufferer is bundled into a train and shipped off to the countryside. A robust uncle or family friend is put in charge. The prescription is simple. Brisk walks at dawn, fishing, shooting, and absolutely no talking about feelings. The idea is that exposure to mud, rabbits, and the British weather will restore a man's nerves faster than any modern machine. He'll be right as rain after a week among the grouse. The doctor assures the family, as if open fields and wet boots can undo years of quiet panic. Should symptoms persist, there is always the hunting lodge, a place where generations of anxious men have sweated out their problems in the company of even more anxious men. The remedy is camaraderie, endless roast beef, and the shared trauma of bathing in ice-cold water. If all else fails, someone will suggest joining the Foreign Office, the clergy, or, in truly dire cases, writing a book about Anglo-Saxon military strategy. Public shaming is the hidden ingredient in the cure. Friends and relations make jokes at the sufferer's expense, assuring him that everyone feels a bit peculiar now and then, but woe to the man who lets it happen more than once. Male hysteria is to be banished, denied, and, if possible, never mentioned again. If a man is caught napping at the wrong hour or expressing a strong preference about curtain fabrics, he will find himself the subject of gentle ridicule for months. Remember when Cousin Alfred had a spell and had to go commune with the hedgerows? Good times, good times. Meanwhile, the doctors continue to publish articles in serious journals, gently walking back their theories about wandering wombs and nervous temperaments. They rename male hysteria as neurasthenia, nervous prostration, or, if feeling poetic, the curse of modern civilization. This new terminology keeps everyone happy. The patient is restored, the family is reassured, and the entire country can go back to pretending men are as sturdy as the empire itself. So, yes, men can get hysteria, but it's never called that, never massaged away, and certainly never discussed at dinner. For the truly nervous gentleman, the greatest cure is denial, followed by a bracing walk, a sporting gun, and the quiet hope that next time his nerves will remember their place. If the standard treatments aren't working, don't worry. There's a traveling salesman selling patent medicines and a German tonic that promises to restore feminine vigor. Ingredients may include cocaine, brandy, and hope. Victorian England is nothing, if not entrepreneurial, especially when it comes to illness. For every serious physician with a mustache and a mission, there are 3 men in loud waistcoats hawking miracle potions from the back of a painted wagon. You can't walk to the end of the street without tripping over a fresh advertisement for some astonishing new elixir, guaranteed to cure everything from nerves to nostalgia. These patent medicines are as common as fog and twice as mysterious. Dr. Swithin's invigorating elixir is a bestseller, promising to banish faintness, restore color to the cheeks, and cheer the weary mind. Its secret? 2 ounces of brandy, a dash of laudanum, and, if rumors are to be believed, just enough belladonna to keep the user lively and slightly hallucinatory. Even more popular is Madame Frou-Frou's celebrated female syrup, recommended for all nervous complaints, melancholia, and the occasional fit of ambition. The sales pitch is irresistible. The traveling huckster arrives with banners flying and a trunk full of testimonials. There are bottles in every shade of amber and green, labels festooned with gold leaf, and promises as flowery as a Victorian garden party. A dose a day keeps hysteria at bay, he shouts, offering samples to a gathering crowd. If you look skeptical, he'll point out his certificate, signed by someone's cousin in Kent, and his photo with a minor aristocrat who once sneezed in his direction. For the more cautious customer, there are German tonics, imported, expensive, and heavily advertised in Ladies' Home Companion. These concoctions are often a lively mixture of herbs, fortified wine, and whatever the chemist had left over at the end of the week. They come in elegant boxes with instructions in 5 languages and a warning not to operate heavy machinery, or, as they call it, the household mangle. After use. Even home remedies get in on the action. Aunt Prudence recommends a mixture of honey, vinegar, and mustard plaster for nerves. The local grocer swears by cod liver oil, while your neighbor insists nothing beats a daily dose of strengthening cocoa, which, in a twist, contains more caffeine than an entire coffee house. The only thing these cures have in common is their ability to leave you slightly dizzy and more determined than ever to try the next one. Some cures are downright alarming. Galvanic belts, worn discreetly under one's corset, promise to send healthy electrical currents surging through your system at the turn of a tiny crank. The advertisements guarantee vitality and delicate stimulation of the organs. In practice, you mostly get a mild shock, a ruined petticoat, and a story you'll never tell in polite company. Of course, none of these patent remedies are subject to scrutiny, regulation, or refund. If one bottle fails to cure you, simply try another, preferably before word gets out that you're on your 3rd tonic this month. No one wants to be known as the lady who can't be fixed with a little brandy and bitters. In the end, quackery is a part of the grand Victorian tradition. Try everything, believe nothing, and always keep a bottle of something mysterious on your nightstand. If all else fails, at least you'll be too pleasantly distracted or mildly intoxicated to worry about your nerves. The real miracle cure, of course, is time. Eventually, every ailment either passes or is replaced by a more fashionable one. Until then, bottoms up, and don't ask too many questions about the ingredients. Trying to explain your medical treatment to your husband, your children, and your mother-in-law is the Victorian equivalent of deleting your browser history. There are questions, there are awkward silences, there is denial, and possibly giggling. The moment you arrive home with a fresh prescription, you know the inquisition is about to begin. Your husband, engrossed in the times and convinced all female ailments can be cured by fresh air or a walk to the post office, raises an eyebrow as you clear your throat. Dr. Henshaw says, "I must have absolute rest," you announce. He blinks, folds his newspaper, and mutters something about robust country stock. When you add, "and I'll need daily treatments," the temperature in the room drops by several degrees. Next comes your mother-in-law, a woman for whom stoicism is a way of life, and who once attended a funeral with a sprained ankle just to make a point. She listens to your list of symptoms with a suspicious squint, then delivers her expert opinion. "In my day, we just took a brisk walk and did without all this fuss." She gives the prescription a once-over, as if it might leap up and start dancing. Her advice, always unsolicited, is simple. Less rest, more vinegar, and never let a doctor near your ankles. Your children sense an opportunity for mischief. They want to know why you're home during the day, what nerves are, and if the doctor will be bringing new toys for them too. The youngest immediately stages a fainting fit on the parlor rug, hoping for similar treatment. The eldest, a budding skeptic, asks if he can have just a bit of your tonic, since he also dislikes boiled cabbage. You attempt to maintain composure while translating medical jargon into something fit for family consumption. "Doctor's orders," you say, striving for an air of authority, require quiet, rest, and regular attendance at the parlor. You leave out the more awkward details, choosing instead to focus on the importance of health and the dangers of overexertion, especially for women who must manage a household, raise a family, and occasionally have thoughts. No one is fooled. Your husband shuffles his feet and escapes to the garden, muttering about needing to supervise the hedge. Your mother-in-law bustles off to inform the cook that you are now to be served weak tea and boiled eggs for the foreseeable future. The children continue their campaign of mock suffering, and you are left in the parlor with a mixture of relief, embarrassment, and the sense that nothing is truly private in a Victorian household. As the week unfolds, you become an object lesson. Relatives drop by, bringing unsolicited advice and the latest magazine articles on nervous complaints. Friends send cards wishing you a speedy recovery. And the housemaid begins dusting around you with exaggerated delicacy, as if hysteria is catching. Even the family dog regards you with a certain wary respect, no doubt sensing that something peculiar is afoot. Soon, the doctor's visits settle into routine, and your prescription becomes just another feature of domestic life, like the umbrella stand or the ever-present scent of boiled onions. You learn to ignore the whispers, answer questions with a gentle smile, and field the children's curiosity with tales of brave women who overcame all odds, armed only with bed rest, patience, and the world's most confusing medical instructions. In time, the novelty wears off, and everyone returns to their usual rhythms. But you know, in your heart, that the real cure for female complaints is simply surviving the family meeting with your sense of humor and your prescription intact. Victorian doctors loved inventing phrases. Pelvic congestion is one of their greatest hits. It means we have no idea. But it sounds impressive. The cure? More of the same. Delivered with a straight face and a bill. You first hear the phrase at your latest appointment, sandwiched between restorative tonics and moderate walks. The doctor's tone is serious, as though revealing the secret of the universe. My dear, you appear to be suffering from pelvic congestion, he intones, nodding wisely while scribbling the words in his ledger with a flourish. You nod along, trying not to laugh or cry, or ask for clarification, none of which would be considered ladylike. What does pelvic congestion feel like? That's the beauty of it. It could be anything. Tiredness, aches, vague malaise, a dislike of cold mutton, or simply the desire to be anywhere else. If you so much as frown during your appointment, pelvic congestion. If you sigh too deeply, pelvic congestion. If you eat 3 desserts at the vicar's luncheon and regret it by sundown, definitely pelvic congestion. It's a diagnosis so all-encompassing that even the ferns in the waiting room are at risk. Once your condition is labelled, the floodgates of treatment open. The doctor prescribes the usual routine: rest, bland food, and of course, manual therapy. There are also recommendations for warm compresses, gentle stretching, and the occasional vibratory intervention, which is discussed in tones usually reserved for seances or accidental fires. A pamphlet from Dr. Bamba's Medical Institute arrives in the post, promising miraculous relief with a device that looks suspiciously like a coffee grinder with extra attachments. The illustration is vague, the instructions vaguer still. Every woman you know has been diagnosed with pelvic congestion at some point. It's practically a rite of passage. Somewhere between your first fainting spell and the year you discovered cod liver oil isn't just for orphans. Some treat it as a badge of honor, others as a sign to avoid the doctor for at least a month. You and your friends compare notes over weak tea and seed cake, swapping stories about who had the worst prescription, usually Mrs. Polworth, who was told to bathe in warm oatmeal, and whose doctor looked the most embarrassed while explaining the details. The true genius of pelvic congestion is how it protects the medical profession. No one can prove you don't have it, and the cure is just as mysterious as the ailment. If you're lucky, your symptoms disappear with a good night's sleep or a brisk walk to the bakery. If not, you can keep returning for follow-up treatment as long as your dignity or your bank account will allow. The social side effects are predictable. Relatives become concerned, sending you gifts of lavender sachets and lemon drops. The maid offers hot water bottles and sage advice. Even the family cat gives you a wider berth, as if pelvic congestion is catching. At every social event, you hear whispered references to delicate constitutions and those troubles. Everyone is an expert. No one is helpful. What's remarkable is that, despite all the medical bluster, you end up managing your condition much as you always have, by enduring, laughing about it with friends, and quietly resolving to try fewer Victorian desserts. You master the art of looking pensive at the doctor's office, accepting your prescription with grace, and never, ever asking what pelvic congestion really means. So the next time someone mentions their pelvic congestion, nod knowingly, offer them a biscuit, and remember, the only thing more mysterious than the diagnosis is the fact that anyone ever survived it, much less paid for the privilege. Sunday comes, and with it, the vicar's weekly check-in. You do your best to hide all evidence of your medical devices, while he prays for your restoration, and you pray he doesn't ask about the suspicious buzzing from your nightstand. In Victorian England, the vicar's visit is a sacred institution, part spiritual guidance, part social surveillance. The entire house springs into a choreography of anxious preparation. The silver is polished, the ferns are dusted, and the children are threatened with dire consequences if they so much as breathe too loudly. You, meanwhile, Make a frantic survey of your bedroom, tucking away pamphlets with titles like The Modern Lady's Guide to Nerves and sliding any incriminating apparatus deep under the bed. Heaven forbid the vicar sees Dr. Fothergill's medico-electrical massager. It would be the scandal of the season. You rehearse your lines. Feeling much improved. Thank you, Reverend. The Lord is gracious, as always. Yes, I have been resting. In reality, you're resting about as much as a hen in a thunderstorm. But the truth has never been a requirement for polite conversation. The vicar arrives promptly, hat in hand, cheeks pink with fresh air and a sense of purpose. He's greeted by your mother-in-law, who treats him like a cross between a saint and an auditor, ushering him in with the kind of reverence reserved for bank holidays and surprise inheritances. The sitting room is the stage. Tea is poured, cake is served, and everyone takes their positions, backs straight, faces composed, hands folded demurely in laps. The vicar opens with polite inquiries about health and the weather, quickly moving on to subtle questions about your recovery. He asks after your nerves, as if they're a separate entity living upstairs. You reply with all the reassuring ambiguity you can muster. He offers to pray with you. You agree, because refusal is unthinkable. As he bows his head and invokes divine aid for your restoration, you try not to think about the real cause of your improvement. A small, humming device currently hidden behind a stack of hymnals. You recite your responses, Amen, very true. Thank you, Reverend, with practiced solemnity, hoping the children won't burst in and announce that Mama's pillow buzzes. Sometimes, the vicar shares gentle advice. Passages from Proverbs about patience, stories of saints who found strength in adversity, the occasional warning against modern distractions. He does not elaborate, but you sense he's suspicious of anything electrical or French. You nod, resolving to move your copy of La Dame aux Camélias even farther from sight. Conversation eventually turns to parish life. The harvest festival, the poor box, Mrs. Parsons' cough, not nervous, just damp, and the general moral temperature of the neighborhood. You are congratulated on your fortitude, your gentle spirit, your ability to keep your composure even as the world and your uterus misbehaves. Behind it all is the unspoken understanding that the vicar sees all, knows all, and, with the right bribe of seed cake, will keep the most delicate secrets out of his next sermon. The visit ends with a flurry of good wishes and the promise of continued prayers. You walk the vicar to the door, heart racing, praying yourself that the children haven't left any medical curiosities in plain sight. The moment he is gone, you breathe a sigh of relief, retrieve your hidden devices, and vow to install a lock on your bedroom door before next Sunday. The vicar's visit is survived once more, your soul slightly soothed, your secrets mostly safe, and your place in the social order preserved for another week, assuming the ferns don't start buzzing. You find your case noted in the doctor's leather-bound journal, somewhere between nervous exhaustion and acute reading habit. Each entry is more cryptic than the last, written in handwriting only the pharmacist and possibly cryptographers can read. The medical journal is a sacred text in the Victorian consulting room, a thick volume smelling of ink, anxiety, and a faint hint of brandy. It sits on the doctor's desk like an oracle, its pages filled with the whispered secrets of every woman in town. No one ever gets to see their own entry, of course, but everyone suspects their deepest fears, and possibly their pudding recipes, are immortalized there. The process begins with a flourish. The doctor dips his pen, squints, and carefully inscribes your symptoms in looping, illegible script. Patient presence with general languor, variable complexion, and aversion to boiled beef. He adds a few Latin words for gravitas, possibly misspelling neurasthenia, but making up for it with confidence and a vigorous underline. Occasionally, he sketches an anatomical diagram, which mostly resembles a sad turnip with arrows. Over the years, the journal becomes an archive of sighs, complaints, and mysterious ailments. There are entries for melancholy brought on by weather, excessive embroidery, and the ever-popular inappropriate interest in politics. The symptoms are as vague as the treatments. Recommended: moderate walks, 2 tablespoons of tonic, and avoidance of all French novels. Sometimes the prescription is simply bed rest. Review in a fortnight. Avoid excitement. See Mrs. Chudley. What's most remarkable is how every ailment is filtered through the doctor's own perspective, coloured by his mood, his opinions on women's education, and, occasionally, what he had for breakfast. If he's feeling progressive, your case might be labelled temporary nerves. If he's annoyed, it becomes stubborn hysteria with dramatic tendencies. If he's had a row with his wife, he might add unusual assertiveness as a worrying new trend. The language in the journal is a world of its own. Spirited disposition, delicate vapours, suspicious fortitude. Some entries read like coded messages. Patient improved after 3 vibratory sessions, recommend continued application. Others descend into medical poetry. A clouded brow, a restless soul, and a nervous system in revolt. You wonder if the doctor is treating you, or simply practicing for a second career as a Gothic novelist. Every so often, you and your friends speculate about what's really written about you. Over teacups and cake, you compare notes, invent diagnoses, and share theories about the most cryptic annotations. Do you think persistent melancholia means I dislike my husband's violin playing? Was acute digestive ennui code for too much trifle at the vicarage? No one knows for sure, but everyone agrees that whatever's in the journal will haunt your descendants for generations. When a new doctor takes over the practice, the journal is handed down like an ancestral curse. He spends the first month deciphering the previous physician's handwriting and the next 6 making up his own. In time, the book will hold layer upon layer of secrets, misdiagnoses, and perhaps even the occasional real insight, buried under centuries of sighs. In the end, the medical journal is less a tool of healing and more a catalogue of the absurdities of Victorian healthcare. It records every passing ache, every fashionable malaise, and every woman brave enough to admit she dislikes boiled cabbage. And while you may never see your own page, you can rest assured it will read, "Patient surviving, recommend continued fortitude and a sensible appreciation for the ridiculous." Looking back, you wonder if anything has really changed. Sure, we've dropped the fainting couches, but try telling your doctor you're overwhelmed and see if the advice isn't maybe get some air, try meditation, and stop reading so much news. It's tempting to laugh at the Victorians and their bizarre therapies, their wandering wombs, and their endless pamphlets about nerves. It all seems so distant, so delightfully outdated, until you realize that some things haven't changed nearly as much as we'd like. Modern life comes with its own assortment of mysterious complaints. You're unlikely to be diagnosed with pelvic congestion, but burnout is more popular than ever, and the cure is still suspiciously close to try sleeping more and have you considered yoga. Doctors no longer prescribe manual therapy, but you're not entirely safe from awkward solutions. You go in complaining of sleeplessness, a racing heart, or the existential panic that comes from trying to pick a health insurance plan. The modern physician nods, types your symptoms into a glowing screen, and assures you that you're just stressed. The remedies are familiar: rest, herbal tea, mindfulness, and, if you're lucky, a handout featuring 6 smiling people doing stretches on a beach. It's all suspiciously reminiscent of Victorian advice. Minus the corsets, even the language lingers. Where once you might have been told your humours were unbalanced, you're now informed your cortisol is elevated. Instead of a fainting couch, you get a foam roller and a playlist of nature sounds. Instead of a letter from your aunt suggesting a brisk walk and less reading, you have a dozen apps telling you to put down your phone and try journaling. Every era has its version of rest cures and well-meaning advice that doesn't actually solve the problem. Meanwhile, the marketing machine is stronger than ever. Victorian women were promised the world if they bought Dr. Fothergill's medico-electrical massager. Now, we're promised inner peace in a bottle, clarity from supplements, and vitality from suspiciously expensive smoothies. You can still buy tonics, now called adaptogens, and every online ad promises to balance your life, your hormones, or your bank account, as long as you don't ask what's actually inside. Perhaps the greatest change is in what we're allowed to say out loud. Today, admitting you're overwhelmed is less likely to land you in a sanatorium, but the pressure to handle it gracefully remains. It's all about maintaining composure, showing resilience, and making sure no one at the office suspects you spent your lunch break hiding in a stairwell. The fainting couch may be gone, but the need to hide our exhaustion is alive and well. Of course, some things are undeniably better. You can seek real help for real problems. Talk to someone trained in more than brisk walks and denial. And, unless you're very unlucky, no one blames your uterus for your bad day. But the echo of Victorian hysteria lingers every time someone says, "It's just nerves," or hands you a peppermint tea as if it's a cure for existential dread. So, have we really cured hysteria? Or just renamed it? Is wellness any less confusing than vitality? Or are we all just Victorians in yoga pants with better Wi-Fi? The next time you feel a wave of nerves or malaise, pause for a moment. Maybe have a cup of tea, put your feet up, and thank your ancestors for blazing a trail through vibrating gadgets, group therapy teas, and at least a dozen cures that did more for the imagination than the nerves. And if all else fails, remember, in every era, surviving life's absurdities is the best medicine of all. You emerge from the office, half relieved and half mortified, clutching your new prescription and desperately hoping the neighbors didn't see you leave. The good news, your nerves feel better. The bad news, you'll never look at your doctor or your own hand the same way again. Stepping out into the cold Victorian air, you pause on the doctor's stoop and gather your composure, tucking the folded prescription into your reticule as if it might bite. The waiting street looks unchanged, but you can't shake the feeling that every curtain on the block has twitched. Mrs. Ellison is sweeping her front steps with the determination of someone who knows all, sees all, and plans to mention it at her next bridge club. You wonder if the news of your visit will reach the grocer before you do. Walking home, you replay the entire appointment in your mind, a blur of awkward instructions, stifled giggles, and the relentless ticking of that enormous consulting room clock. The memory of the doctor's carefully neutral expression, his gloves, and the alarming mechanical whirring lingers with a mix of embarrassment and curiosity. You try to convince yourself it was all perfectly normal. After all, you're a modern Victorian woman, and this is the price of health, or so they say. At the garden gate, you take a deep breath and paste on your most nonchalant smile. No one must ever suspect what actually happens behind the frosted glass of Dr. Henshaw's practice. If anyone asks, you were there for a general consultation or, better yet, seasonal advice, you consider inventing a minor but socially acceptable ailment, perhaps an allergy to gooseberries or an unfortunate reaction to embroidery thread. Inside, the household hums with the same routine as always. The maid is dusting, your husband is busy ignoring his correspondence, and the children are making a fortress from the parlor cushions. Yet you notice a subtle shift, a side eye from the cook, a knowing glance from your sister-in-law, and a sense that the family dog is now eyeing you with newfound respect or confusion. You vow never to leave the prescription where it might be discovered. Rest and regular therapy sounds innocuous enough, until someone asks about the therapy part. The afternoon passes in a blur of chores, mild anxiety, and several attempts to look natural. Each time you catch your own reflection, you wonder if you seem different, healthier, perhaps, or simply someone who now has a secret weapon against the vapors. You avoid the urge to giggle every time the word nerves is mentioned at tea. For all the embarrassment, you have to admit, the treatment does seem to have had an effect. Your spirits are lighter, and the house feels a little less suffocating. Evening arrives, and as you settle into bed, you replay the whole affair once more, this time with a touch of triumph. You have faced the doctor, survived the treatment, and managed to keep your composure, more or less. There's a certain power in knowing you've endured something the magazines hint at but never name. You're part of a secret society now, one whose password is manual therapy, and whose initiation ritual is equal parts awkwardness and relief. You drift off with a wry smile, a sense of accomplishment, and the knowledge that tomorrow will bring new challenges, be they nerves, gossip, or another walk past Dr. Henshaw's door. Whatever happens, you have your prescription, your sense of humor, and a story you'll never tell, unless it's in a whisper, at a tea party, with all the doors closed. In the end, that's as much as any Victorian patient can hope for. A little relief, a lot of secrecy, and, above all, the ability to laugh about it. Eventually, no Victorian medical story is complete without a detour into phronology. Science's most prestigious head-scratching party trick. Your doctor spends an hour feeling your scalp, declaring your tendency toward melancholy, musical aptitude, and an excess of spleen. All from a few suspicious lumps, and none of it helpful. It's like getting your fortune read by someone who only knows topography. It usually begins after your third or fourth consultation for nerves. The doctor, perhaps frustrated that you're still unwell despite vigorous therapy and more rest than a retired cat, recommends something cutting-edge. Phronology, the science of reading character and mental ability by examining the bumps and valleys of your head, has swept Victorian England like a particularly persistent case of the sniffles. The phrenologist arrives with a small suitcase and a large sense of importance. He wears spectacles, a plaid waistcoat, and a look of serene certainty. The living room is converted into a temporary examination chamber. A plush armchair becomes your throne, and the rest of the family hovers at a safe distance, pretending to busy themselves with mending, dusting, or, if wise, leaving the house entirely. He produces a chart, a human head divided into regions, each labeled with attributes such as secretiveness, amativeness, and the mysterious philoprogenitiveness. The terminology is impressive, even if the science is dubious. Please relax, he instructs, before launching into a performance equal parts massage, fortune-telling, and polite groping. He traces the shape of your skull, pausing at a bump above your left ear. Ah, he declares, here is the center of benevolence, very well developed. You wonder if that means you're generous or just have an unusual hat size. He finds a slight indentation near your temple and nods gravely. This suggests a weakness in concentration, he murmurs. Best avoid chess and parliamentary debates. He assures you that the swelling at the crown of your head is a sign of spiritual aspirations, not a remnant of last week's low doorframe incident. The entire experience feels suspiciously like being read like a map, except the directions are all wrong and the roads haven't been invented yet. The family listens in, wide-eyed. The children hope for evidence of combativeness, the better to win arguments, while your mother-in-law looks for submissiveness, the better to win them herself. The diagnosis is long, elaborate, and entirely non-committal. According to the final report, you are musical, prone to melancholy, slightly deficient in caution, and a danger to yourself with a pair of scissors. Naturally, a prescription follows. More drawing, less arithmetic, and, for reasons never explained, a suggestion to wear a looser bonnet. Your husband, upon learning that he is high in friendship but low in order, uses this as an excuse never to tidy his study again. Friends come calling, eager to compare their skull notes and trade rumors about Mrs. Pritchard's prodigious region of adhesiveness. Phronology, for all its claims, never manages to cure anyone's nerves, but it does provide endless conversation and a new way to explain away every family quirk. Headaches are blamed on excessive hope, clumsiness on insufficient weight, and rebellious daughters on a surfeit of individuality. In the end, you survive the ordeal with only minor scalp trauma and a lingering suspicion that medical science is mostly about keeping people entertained. If nothing else, you now have a certificate declaring you officially well bumped. Frame it, forget it, and pray no one brings out the calipers at your next tea party. When all else fails, the apothecary offers liquid comfort, laudanum for the nerves, gin for everything else, and maybe a drop of mysterious brown tincture labeled "Do not operate horse-drawn carriages after use." The result: you're either cured or asleep until Tuesday, which, frankly, is a win-win in Victorian England. The apothecary's shop is a wonderland of glass bottles, musty scents, and more whispered secrets than the parish vestry. You step inside to a counter lined with blue jars, scales, and an apothecary who looks as though he hasn't slept since the invention of liniment. He greets you with a knowing smile. He's seen every ailment, invented a few himself, and is ready to recommend something with a wink and a flourish of his mortar and pestle. Your doctor's prescription is cryptic: a sedative for nerves, to be taken as needed. The apothecary nods, disappears into the back, and returns with a tiny, corked bottle of laudanum. The label reads, "For gentle relief. May cause drowsiness, improved mood, or conversations with angels." You've heard rumors of its strength. Poets love it, housemaids fear it, and at least 2 cousins credit it with their ability to endure Sunday dinner. Laudanum is the Victorian cure-all, equal parts opium, alcohol, and hope. It tastes like despair but works like magic. 1 teaspoon calms your nerves, 2 ensures you sleep through your husband's attempt at poetry recitation. The warnings are vague but dire. Use with care. May cause euphoria, vivid dreams, and a tendency to monologue about clouds. In moments of true desperation, you pair it with a drop of gin, strictly for medicinal purposes, of course. The apothecary, ever helpful, also recommends a brown bottle of restorative cordial. The ingredients are a mystery, but the effects are immediate. A warm flush, a sense of invincibility, and the ability to ignore the family's questions about dinner. Some swear by the stuff for melancholy, others for stubborn children or intractable laundry. If you ask for details, the apothecary shrugs and says, "A little of this, a little of that," works wonders for the constitution. For the more adventurous, there are even bottles marked experimental. No one knows what they do, and only the bravest or most desperate try them. Mrs. Wilkins insists her arthritis vanished after 3 drops, though she also reported seeing her late aunt's ghost in the pantry. The apothecary offers no guarantees, only a discreet discount for repeat customers. Back home, your medicine chest grows crowded. Bottles of every shape and size nestle among hair tonics and rosewater. Each label offers hope. Invigorates the blood, cures all that ails, restores delicate femininity. You try to keep track of the dosages, but between the laudanum, the cordial, and the occasional gin and tonic for the nerves, it's all a pleasant blur. In time, you learn to read the signs. When the household grows too loud, when your nerves fray, or when the prospect of another dinner with your in-laws looms, it's time for a discreet teaspoon and an early night. Some days you wake up feeling cured, some days you wake up on Thursday. Either way, you're grateful for the apothecary's silent promise. No matter what the diagnosis, there's always a bottle, and if nothing else, the best excuse for a nap this side of the sanatorium. Victorian medicine may not have cured much, but it did know one thing. Sometimes all you need is a little laudanum, a splash of gin, and the resolve to ignore the side effects until the next prescription. A few doctors believe the real answer to hysteria is exercise, modest, dignified, and designed not to jostle anything vital. You find yourself waving silk scarves in a drafty parlor while a stern matron counts to 8, and everyone pretends not to notice that their corsets are cutting off circulation. The prescription arrives one bleak afternoon, tucked inside a pamphlet titled On the Restoration of Feminine Vigor Through Graceful Movement. Your doctor, who has begun to suspect that the real cause of your malaise is lethargic circulation, recommends you attend Mrs. Pennington's gymnastics salon. You picture iron dumbbells and sweating, muscular men. Instead, you're greeted by a small army of frail women in ankle-length bloomers and expressions of pure dread. The salon itself is a study in contradiction. On one hand, it's full of light, airy curtains and the lingering smell of lavender water. On the other, the only equipment is a set of bamboo wands, several silk scarves, and a wooden hoop of uncertain provenance. The stern matron, Mrs. Pennington herself, stands at the front with a pointer and an iron will. She assures you these calisthenic arts are designed to invigorate, never excite, and will improve your health without risking excessive feminine animation. The first exercise is the scarf wave. You are instructed to hold a piece of pale silk in each hand and perform a series of slow, sweeping gestures to promote serenity in the limbs. The sensation is less invigorating and more like signaling surrender from behind enemy lines. Next comes the bamboo wand, lifted gently, never vigorously, in movements that resemble dusting the upper shelves. You feel neither stronger nor more graceful, but you do develop an urgent desire for tea. The matron demonstrates a routine called the harmonious circle, which involves turning in place 3 times while balancing on one heel. Half the class manages only 2 before toppling into a potted fern. The lesson continues with gentle stretching, reach for the sky, but only with decorum. Breathing exercises, no huffing, ladies, simply sigh with purpose. And an earnest attempt at synchronized heel lifts. All to the accompaniment of a pianist playing something blandly uplifting, presumably to keep any dangerous rhythms at bay. Despite the matron's assurance that proper motion cures the nerves, you're fairly certain the only thing you've gained is a new ache in your left shoulder and a mild resentment of scarves. Still, you soldier on. The session ends with a group cool-down consisting of 5 minutes of reflective repose, which, translated, means sitting on a hard bench while Mrs. Pennington reads aloud from her memoir, My Life Among the Nervous. Back home, you regale your family with tales of athletic heroism. Your husband raises an eyebrow at the mention of bamboo wands. The children demand a demonstration, resulting in a brief but chaotic reenactment of the scarf routine, with the family cat playing a key role. You pour yourself a restorative cordial and vow to feign improvement at your next appointment. The theory behind Victorian gymnastics is noble. A healthy mind in a gently exercised body. The reality is a parlor full of bewildered women, a pile of tangled scarves, and a matron who could intimidate a regiment of cavalry. Still, you must admit there's a peculiar satisfaction in surviving an hour of calisthenics with your dignity mostly intact. At the very least, you've earned the right to claim you're pursuing the latest in medical advice. And if the ferns never recover from the harmonious circle, well, that's just one more casualty in the long war against Victorian nerves. Some women are sent to the spa for hydrotherapy, which means being alternately steamed, dunked, wrapped in towels, and scrubbed with vigor. You emerge, relaxed, slightly cooked, and wondering if the real cure is just being left alone for 2 hours without anyone diagnosing your spleen. the prescription arrives with a flourish. A course of spa treatments, declares your doctor, to restore vitality and soothe the nerves. You have visions of serene mineral springs and tranquil gardens. Instead, you are bundled off to the nearest bathing establishment, a fortress of marble, tile, and echoes, where health is measured by the gallon and modesty is more aspiration than reality. You are greeted by a matron in starched linen who regards you as both a patient and a towel-folding challenge. She instructs you to disrobe behind a creaking screen, where you discover that Victorian spa attire consists mostly of wool, optimism, and wishful thinking. You shuffle into the first chamber, trailing a cloud of uncertainty and the faint scent of lavender soap. The treatment begins with a mud pack, pale, chilly, and applied liberally to all exposed surfaces. Excellent for drawing out impurities, the matron assures you, as if you're a troublesome stain on a prized tablecloth. You sit, statue-like, while the mud hardens and conversation is discouraged. The silence is only broken by the distant hiss of steam and the giggles of someone 2 stalls down who's realized her cousin is next in line for the dunking bath. Next comes the steam chamber, a marble room filled with hot, fragrant mist and exactly zero privacy. You are led to a bench, handed a towel, and told to breathe deeply and reflect on your blessings. You reflect mostly on the fact that your towel appears to be shrinking by the second, and that you now have the urge to confess every minor sin since childhood. Other women sit nearby, sweating with the determination of marathoners, all silently united in a desperate hope that no one will faint in a dramatic fashion. Just when you think you've achieved maximum saturation, it's time for the cold plunge. Invigorating, the matron cries, as she shepherds you to a pool of water so icy it could qualify as a medical emergency. There is a collective gasp as each woman is dunked, towel and all, and a not-so-subtle competition to see who can emerge looking the least traumatized. This is followed by a brisk scrub-down, loofah, soap, and all sense of decorum thrown to the wind. You are polished until you squeak, then wrapped in warm towels and left to rest. The resting room is a long gallery of reclined women, all resembling overcooked vegetables, eyes closed, muttering prayers of gratitude for still having a pulse. The entire process takes hours. You lose all sense of time, dignity, and possibly a few skin cells. By the end, you are pronounced renewed, handed a glass of tepid mineral water, and released into the world with skin as pink as a boiled ham. The doctor will later praise the spa's invigorating effects, and you will agree, mostly out of a desire never to be sent back. Back at home, you describe the ordeal as refreshing, knowing full well that the real benefit was the brief escape from daily life. The only risk greater than drowning in modesty was being caught laughing at the absurdity of it all. If nothing else, you've learned that sometimes the greatest cure is 2 hours of forced relaxation and a strong sense of humor. No day is complete without someone swooning onto a fainting couch, either from the heat, the corset, or just sheer social exhaustion. Collapsing gracefully becomes a competitive sport, with extra points for dramatic size and minimal property damage. Doctors are called, smelling salts are waved, and your diagnosis is, yet again, too much womanhood for 1 century. The fainting couch is the centerpiece of every respectable Victorian home, upholstered in enough velvet to smother a rhinoceros and carefully positioned near a window for optimal audience visibility. Its main purpose? To catch the delicate and the overwhelmed, or anyone needing a brief escape from needlework, politics, or a particularly long reading of Paradise Lost. It's both furniture and lifestyle, a symbol of refinement and, let's be honest, the best way to exit a dull conversation. Afternoons are prime fainting time. The house is heavy with heat, the air thick with the scent of parlour flowers, starch, and whatever tonic the apothecary delivered this week. You and your fellow ladies are arrayed in your best, corseted within an inch of consciousness. Conversation turns to poetry, or the local scandal, or, God forbid, the price of coal, and suddenly someone's vision clouds, her cheeks pale, and she slumps artfully onto the couch. Is it low blood sugar? The soul-crushing boredom of embroidery? Or simply a tactical retreat from Aunt Agnes's opinions on wallpaper? No one ever says. What matters is the spectacle. The afflicted party must sigh just so, flutter her lashes, and, if possible, murmur something poetic. "Oh, the vapors" is a classic, but variations abound. My nerves, how the world spins, or, for the truly dedicated, fetch Dr. Henshaw, I am undone. The surrounding ladies rush to help, fanning the stricken one with lace handkerchiefs and dabbing her brow with eau de cologne. It's a delicate ballet. Too little drama, and you're ignored. Too much, and you risk being accused of affectation. For the household staff, this is just another item on the to-do list. The maid knows where the smelling salts are kept, right next to the biscuits. And the butler is skilled at moving fainting couches to catch a swoon from any angle. The family dog, sensing excitement, is likely to join the fray, adding a touch of chaos to an already theatrical moment. Of course, the doctor must be summoned. He arrives briskly, medical bag in hand, ready to pronounce a verdict. Diagnosis is swift: nervous prostration, a touch of the vapors, or, if feeling poetic, the exhaustion of the feminine spirit. The cure: rest, mild tonics, and a renewed prescription for quiet afternoons. Sometimes a change of air is advised. Other times, simply fewer opinions at tea. The social benefits of a well-timed faint are considerable. You might avoid a disagreeable chore, elicit sympathy from distant relatives, or simply gain a few moments of peace. Some ladies have turned fainting into high art, able to crumple on cue when confronted with bad news, unwanted suitors, or an alarming new hat. There are even whispers of friendly wagers who will faint first at the next garden party, and for what reason? Extra points awarded for creativity, minimal fuss, and a convincing recovery. In the end, the afternoon faint is less about frailty and more about survival. In a world demanding constant composure and infinite patience, sometimes the only sensible thing to do is take a dramatic tumble. Enjoy the fuss, and let everyone else wonder how you managed to look so graceful doing absolutely nothing. If only all medical crises came with this much velvet. So tonight, as you settle into your clean bed with indoor plumbing, thermostats, and the freedom to treat nervous excitement with whatever streaming service or snack you please, maybe take a second to be quietly grateful. Not just for your own sanity, but for the unintentional comedy of medical history. Because surviving a day as a Victorian hysteria patient wasn't about comfort, clarity, or even dignity. It was about enduring a relentless parade of nonsense with a straight face. Vibrating gadgets the size of steam engines, prescription rest that felt more like solitary confinement, and medical advice so questionable that today it would earn your doctor a YouTube apology video. Remember the courage it took to keep a straight face while a mustachioed man in a frock coat suggested your uterus was staging an uprising, or your best hope was a brisk massage and a glass of laudanum. Their suffering was real, their resilience astonishing, and their ability to navigate embarrassment truly next level. And somehow, through all the awkwardness and the outright weirdness, people endured. They didn't just survive, sometimes. They laughed, whispered, or rolled their eyes behind a fan. They found tiny moments of joy and connection, even while history was busy getting it all so wrong. So as you drift off tonight, remember, history may be full of discomfort and ridiculousness, but it's also a record of stubborn, hopeful, deeply human persistence. The world may never again prescribe manual therapy for a rough day, but people will always find ways to cope, sometimes with science, sometimes with nonsense, but always with a sense of humor. Good night. May your dreams be free of wandering wombs, steam-powered gadgets, and prescription fainting spells. And may you wake up tomorrow grateful that your only hysteria is choosing what's for breakfast. Sleep well.